the monk seal, is found in the Kumalipo. And the monk seal in the Kumalipo is found in Wa, or chant 6, line 555. It actually is the name that we know, and they saw it as the rat of the sea, the Iole. The monk seal was always in harmony with the Hawaiian people. And the problems that we have with the monk seal today is that what people forget is that the federal government allowed the fishermen to basically carve up the Northwest Pacific Islands, and they over-harvested the lobsters, which is the primary food source of the monk seal. And so the monk seals started to starve to death because their primary food source was gone. And the current NOAA proposal to bring in monk seals and impose them on the 8 Hawaiian Islands is a disastrous, from our point of view, as a papikilo hoku, and also as a kahuna of the ocean, kahuna lapa'au, and also as a kahuna dealing with seaweed, because traditionally, since Captain Cook came to Hawaii in January 1778, there were 1.2 million Hawaiian people living in Hawaii in harmony with tens of thousands of monk seals, and both of them harvested the ocean. Both of them depended on their primary protein food source from the ocean. And the question is, why was it in harmony? And what is being asked in the Western scientific community to impose something that never existed before would be equivalent to not learning from the past when they came up with the brilliant idea of using the cane toad to eat the insects for the sugar cane, or the mongoose to eat the rat that was nocturnal, or bringing in the mosquito, or even Dr. Doty in the 50s bringing in invasive limu. It's like we don't learn from the past, and the tragic thing is they don't come to the Hawaiian cultural practitioners and ask the why. And what's important is that by imposing a species that normally it would come intermittently, a very curious mammal that would come down, and was seen as bringing its hunger. So Hawaiians did the Konahiki system, and the Konahiki system was a system of rest and conservation to increase the opportunity abundance by what we call kahuna o maka. Kahuna o maka is to be able to see and to look at the rhythms of nature as they increase and expand the opportunity of abundance by rest. In the Western culture, the idea of rest does not come in. They try to overproduce or over-harvest, and that collapses a species, or that brings in disease.
It collapses soil itself.
So what we do is, within our fish ponds, Hawaiians had fish ponds that basically rested the ocean, especially during breeding time. So when you had the loko ia, the fish ponds, which we know as a kahuna, as a heiau, because that fish pond is sacred because we have a ku and hina stone. The hina stone represents the female energy of life in the moon, and the ku, which is the upright, the male energy, is above the water, the hina stone below the water, and when they meet together, you have the kanebahine force, the next generation of life brought through these two forces. So it's not a duality, it's a triality. And what we did was, in our loko ia, we built it around a primary spring source, a water source, because where you have fresh water, you have the increase of the abundance of life through the nitrates and nutrients that make the limu or algae grow. So that attracts your shrimp, and that attracts your invertebrates, and that attracts larger fish in the food chain. And that's the basic foundation of the food chain. And that comes through our auvai, from the vai in the mountain, the fresh water, which is our treasure, that goes underground, becomes huna, hidden by hunavai. And then it comes out through the vai huna of the springs at the auvai, where the fresh water and brackish water mix. You have your estuaries. We build our fish pond with a heart, a pulmonary system. We build it around a spring. That spring pushes water in and out via the fresh water. The reason why we use a coral or a lava rock basalt wall acts as a semi-permeable membrane like your skin. It's breathing. Our loko ia is a living thing. It's a living heiau that breathes. And it allows the zua and photoplankton to come in. It allows the basic form of foundation of the food chain to establish itself. Now what we do is we also make these small heiaus.
Hello.
And these small heiaus, we bring limu in, certain types of limu to increase the food source. And so what we have is a biosphere, a working biosphere that actually increases the opportunity of abundance in the natural way. And so this is the foundation of our food source for protein, because the Hawaiian calendar is based on the opelo and the ulua. And our fishing practices, we rest that during its mating season in January and February. So we rest the ocean by using our loko in the mountains, our maya, our bananas, our sweet potatoes, and the poi that we have from our kala or huli. And so we have a system in the konehiki of everything going on and off at different times of reproduction, so that we don't stop the ability of nature to rest, recuperate, and come back again. We only take what we need. We don't mass produce for monetary consumption. We actually follow in the Kumulipo Chant 1, the 13 limus that are talked about that are protected by plants in the mountain that protect what is in the ocean. So we have an elaborate system of protection. When we put fishes in our fish pond, we don't use one species in lieu of another, because nature is not one species in lieu of another. We plant trees like the hau trees that give its leaves and flower, which is medicine. It also attracts in its biodecomposition, it attracts the opai that come in to feed. So we're constantly building under layers of food production for the entire food chain without collapsing it with disease, because we put in cleaner wrasses, colorful fish that clean, opai that clean. We also bring the barracuda in, and what that does is it culls the very old and sick. So we don't bring in a diseased population. We have trigger mechanisms that control the disease factor, whereby these artificial cages that are being proposed off of our fishery at Kohala do the exact opposite. What they do is they hybridize, actually genetic engineer the fishes, one species, to grow fast, to grow big, but are weak and very susceptible to disease, which will collapse their entire chain. They don't put cleaner wrasses. They don't put smaller barracudas in there to cull the sick. So what they do is they set up a diseased population which has been reproduced for the last 25 years over and over again. Even when they use nets, the disease and mites that go in the net, they don't have the trigger mechanisms to protect, because they don't look at the natural cycle of nature, and they exclude all the protection mechanisms that we build in for the last 2,300 years and are experts in. And we even bring in medicine limu to help the fish. So throughout the whole process, it's built on a strong foundation of triggers and checks and balances that keep everything in a stable, steady state of reproduction and food distribution. And it's done in the natural way. We don't make pellets, artificial pellets, taking anchovies and robbing one food source for another. We work within the natural food source. In the Kumulipo Chant 1, we fished and we looked inside the stomach and the guts of the fish. And we saw that fish, those fishes like tuna, actually are part vegetarian, which most of the Western scientists don't know, that the fruits in the mountains come down to the streams and rivers and are given as bribes in lieu of eating the limu. That's how they protect the limu. That's how they guard the limu in the ocean, because when we degutted the fish, we could see the food source from the mountains, that the fish, these pelagic fish, which in Western science ideas are just going after other fish, but they don't degut them on a regular basis to see that some of their food sources are actually vegetation via fruits that come down through the springs and the rivers. So in the system that we watched as Kahuna Omaka, we protect the entire ecosystem by mimicking what works in the natural biosphere. And so what this does, it holds everything in check and balance, and we don't overproduce, we don't overharvest. We don't go after the big female producers of eggs. We make sure they stay around because they're the ones bringing hundreds of thousands of eggs. The Western mentality is get the prize, get the biggest one. Well, you're taking the big producers out. And surprise, we're running out of fish because you're taking offline the biggest producers of eggs that lay hundreds of thousands of eggs. And you're going to the adults that just produce maybe 1,000 or 5,000 eggs. So there's a massive fall off of production within the ocean. So you're decreasing the abundance and the opportunity of abundance by not looking at the cycles of nature. So we had this system whereby in the Konihiki, Hawaiians were using their main food source of the ocean, but subsidizing it, like on Molokai, with 88 fish ponds. Every island had fish ponds. Every fish pond had a pulmonary system of fresh water, either through a spring or a stream. And what that did was flush out, constantly flush out. There was no buildup of waste material. We in the fish ponds, and their waste helped the growth of the limu that we selectively took from nature that would increase the opportunity of abundance, but keep a healthy fish population. Because when you artificially think you know what fishes need in pellets and try to put into pellets what you think they need, you're depriving them of what nature normally gives them. And so they don't have a balanced diet. They become very weak, and you collapse the population. You open it up for disease. So when we get to the monk seal, and we get to our Hawaiian local ia, and 1.2 million Hawaiians, and tens of thousands of monk seals living together in harmony, my proposal to NOAA for the monk seal situation is not to put kapus on Hawaiian cultural practitioners that never had kapus in 2,300 years, but to get a grant from the National Science Foundation of $20 million, work through the University of Hawaii and through the Big Island Deep Sea Project, where they pull up from the depths 3,000 feet down that nutrient-rich water. And what you want to do is you want to answer the cause of the problem to begin with, was the overharvesting of the basic base food source of the monk seals, which are lobsters. So the lobsters, you want to take the roe, which are its eggs, and when they're fertilized in captive tanks, you want to breed them and grow them until they're about 5 or 6 inches in the thousands, tens of thousands. And then you want to take them to the Northwest Pacific Islands and reseed them back. They have a higher likelihood of surviving in greater numbers. So you're bringing back the basic food source, which answers the reason why the seals were starving in the first place, instead of artificially imposing them on a situation which is going to create more problems. That goes back to bringing in the mongoose, that goes back to bringing in the mosquito, and that goes back to bringing in the cane toad, which had disastrous ecological effects on our island. And you have to learn by your mistakes, and you have to learn what was the success that allowed the increase of abundance of 1.2 million people in Hawaii without maps and navigation or an outside food source, and not depleting and not polluting your original base for your land. So for the proposal for NOAA to get the monies from the National Science Foundation to get the University of Hawaii to employ people to basically breed the eggs of the lobsters and bring back the basic food source for the Northwest Pacific Islands of Hawaii for the Hawaiian Monk Seal. You don't impose and bring in an artificial structure where you take a natural breeding population that is used to the Pacific Northwest for millennia and then change their natural cycle and change and disrupt what has been going on for tens of thousands of years, because you just forgot that you were the cause of the problem to begin with. And now you're creating a bigger problem that never existed before because you didn't go back to what caused the abundance of life with the monk seal in the first place. It doesn't make sense and it isn't logical when you're trying to answer the problem and you're not even looking at the problem. And oh, by the way, don't let the facts get in the way. So it does not make any sense at all. That's from a Hawaiian cultural practitioner's perspective, by the way, which they didn't bother to ask. And if you want to know what the rhythms and cycles that worked, you have to go back to the 1.2 million people that were in harmony with nature and didn't collapse or pollute nature. In fact, enhanced it. What we did was we did drainage systems so that the erosion of the male rain, our Hawaiian people, when it came to erosion, we had heiaus or terraces in the mountains, and we did that and we channeled the natural flow as we observed it, that wouldn't destroy and erode the soil, because erosion meant the destruction of the freshwater estuaries where the magic begins for life. This is where all the nutrients coming down with the fresh water build the food cycle foundation through algae, through the growth of our 200 limus that bring in the basic forms of life of the opai, of your smaller invertebrates that are the food source for larger fishes. And the limu itself is the source material and the source foundation of protein. Our major limus of manuea, lipoa, of koko, which is limu kohu, and also palahalaha. These food sources, some of them are mentioned in chant 1 of the Kumulipo, have a 45% carbohydrate level, which means it's a high energy source material, not only for fishes, turtles, and invertebrates, but also for us humans. It's equivalent to having rice or potatoes. So if you're walking a lot and fishing a lot, and you need a food source substance that will not rot or degenerate without refrigeration, the salting of our pa'akai limu, which is the lipoa, and also the limu kohu, can last for over a year. And here you have a rich carbohydrate protein source, carbohydrate source that gives you the energy that you need. So even if you were warriors and you were on the run out of your canoe, if you were by the water, you could scoop down and get this limu that you need and chomp on it as you run, giving you the sugar carbohydrate load that is released slowly so that you have the energy to get from point A to point B. And we need, in our Hawaiian cultural practice, we needed to make sure that erosion didn't take place to destroy the foundation of what we saw as the food chain of life. We also have Hawaiian technologies of dispersion of water and springs at the sea, which I'm not going to go totally in depth into because it is patentable. It's a certain substance that we use to diffuse the spring water so it wouldn't erode the beaches. It wouldn't erode the land. But we built an underground heiau using this certain substance to keep in check the natural balance so that it would be there, our foundation would be there. So in these natural cycles of kahuna o maka, we utilized what worked the best to enhance and increase the opportunity of abundance without pollution or collapsing the source-based population that it depended on by resting. Very important to rest. In the cycles of the moon, there are rests. In the cycles of the moon, we have the second phase of the moon, kiaka. And what it does is it naturally rips the limu, or not rips, but oki, it tears the limu for reproduction vegetation. It was its own planting. And what it did was it planted some of the seeds that they had and some of the vegetable mass that the limu had, and spread it under the coral and under the rocks that held it so that it could regenerate and start a new cycle again. So without understanding and seeing the what really worked, you miss the foundation of the supports and the protection systems, which in Western science they haven't gotten down yet. And it is very important to go after the Native Hawaiian cultural practitioners to ask them what's the appropriate method and means to achieve action and motive to get your balance. Without balance, you collapse the entire system. So we have to be akamai, aware, maka'ala, where we're going to, and to see the pathway, what worked in the past, and why did it work, and how do we continue that system. Okay, I guess we can.